this border war. Fans call it Moonshine Throwdown. I think that's the best rivalry name, an unofficial name, but the best rivalry name I've come across.
Yeah, unofficial that should become official soon enough.
Embrace it.
5 receivers at Duncan's disposal. Duncan stepping up. Hit! Ball is loose!
Big call here.
Marshall thinks they have it. And the Horde do!
Here's the kickoff from Amaretto Curry to the Hilltoppers, and we are underway. And a fake reverse on the kick return. And here comes Townsend down the left sideline. What a way to start it for Western Kentucky on the road. And it is an opening touchdown return. And just like that, the Hilltoppers strike first.
Justin Rohrwasser to try to win it for Marshall from 53 yards out. It's got the leg. It is good! And the perfect season continues for Justin Rohrwasser.
Goes for 2. Going for the win. Western Kentucky going for the victory. Rolling to his right. Quick strike. And they did it! Western Kentucky has ended the perfect season into the hands of Willie McNeil. A shocker here in West Virginia. And it is over for Marshall. They end the regular season 11-1.
Welcome back to the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. After much anticipation by hopefully a lot of you, Stephen joins me tonight, and we're going to kick off the 2021 series of position group breakdowns, and we're coming out swinging right out of the gate. There is no other talked about position for the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers more talked about than quarterback, and for a number of reasons. It's been at the highest of the highs and the lowest of the lows since we've been doing this podcast. And we're going to see what 2021 brings. There were a lot of moves made. It's a lot of new faces in the quarterback room. There are some holdovers from the previous year's roster that are still there, but nobody that has taken a meaningful snap for the Toppers in the locker room this year. And even the quarterback coach has switched responsibilities. Last year it was Brian Ellis. This year it's the new offensive coordinator, Zach Kitley, also double dutying with the quarterbacks. And we'll get into that a little bit later as to why. If you don't know by now, you must have been sleeping under a rock. If you don't know what's going on with the Western Kentucky quarterback, I guess big headline wise. Phil still loves the Hilltopper quarterback, Steve, even though it's a complete revamp of the unit, ranking him number 1 in the conference. Nationally, number 58. I mean, look, Phil's the guy. He knows what's going on way better than we do, which is why we trust what he puts out so much. We do a lot of our own due diligence, and we try to keep our finger on the pulse. But you know, we're not in tune with all 130-ish FBS programs. It's just not going to happen. So when you get a national ranking of 58 from a Conference USA school, you got to be doing something right. And to come in with a completely revamped look in the room, basically, to be number 1 in the conference, something's going on, and we're going to talk about that something. On the roster, Western Kentucky Sports, 6 quarterbacks currently on the roster at WKUsports.com, 0 returning starters. There were a couple of losses, of course. Well, there's probably more than a couple if it's basically a revamped unit, but main losses, Piggy T and Kavaris Thomas. Those guys split duty, took basically every snap for the season, if not all the snaps, and now both have entered the portal. Western Kentucky, this is a cool stat. I mean, a lot of folks have probably figured, yeah, something's kind of amiss with quarterback here and there for a while. Western Kentucky will have a new quarterback for week 1 for the, 6th straight year, maybe 5th straight year. We're just going to, whoever QB1 is this year will be a new one. Last year it was Piggy T. Before that, week 1 was Stephen Duncan. The year before that, Drew Eccles. And the year before that, Mike White. So Mike White in 2016 and 2017 was the last Hilltopper quarterback to start consecutive week 1 games. It's been a real in Bowling Green, Kentucky. which is probably why some major moves were made. Lighten up the scoreboard was not something that was happening very often the past couple of years, really, at least not through the air, and last year in particular. So Tyson Helton went out and made some moves, went down to the Lone Star State of Texas and pulled up some prolific passers, coaches, and pass catchers. And all of those we'll talk about at various points throughout our position group breakdown. So, Steve, these Western Kentucky Hilltopper quarterbacks, right out of the gate, Bailey Zappi is getting tons and tons of pub. A lot of folks are calling this like one of the best moves in the transfer portal. He comes in highly a high-profile guy from the FCS level, and you got half of the folks that are like, well, we'll see how that translates to the FBS level, and then you got these other folks that say, well, it doesn't really matter. If you can throw the ball, you can throw the ball. But let's be honest, if you're at the top of the FCS, is it really that big of a difference from Conference USA, Sun Belt, the quote unquote lower tiers of the G5? No, not really. So, where do you want to start, man? We can talk about some, I want to know what you think about the rankings of the unit based on what we don't know and we do know, and what you're expecting to see a little bit from a fan perspective versus what we've been seeing the past few years.
Well, obviously I'm a big fan of Zappi. Just from watching him in the spring game, he just brings just a confidence and a calmness to the field that we haven't seen since Mike White. He's not happy feet back there in the pocket. I really hope that he came into the year under the radar. I kind of wanted him to be that sneaky grab and just come in low expectations, and then just kind of surprise everybody by week 2 or 3 just by lighting up the scoreboards. But obviously all these preseason predictions and rankings and just, he's being talked up. And then when you talk about the FCS, FBS thing, I see the concerns, if you were just plucking from any FCS school and saying, how are you going to do over here at FBS at that level? But when you look at the school that he played for and the system they played in and the opponents they played last year, 2 of their opponents last year were Conference USA schools. One of them was a Power 5 school, and they also played EKU, if I'm not mistaken. And he's playing with FCS linemen, running back, total group of talent that was all FCS recruited players, and was on par and keeping up, maybe not winning games, but was putting up offensive yards and points to keep them competitive in those games. And then when you basically transplant that offense, the coordinator, the quarterback, 3 pass catchers from that team and bring them to Western Kentucky, you're going to hear us say plug and play offense quite a bit this season. That's kind of what we expect. Obviously, there's going to be some wrinkles. There's a lot of new faces, running backs, coaches, offensive linemen. There's a lot of pieces that have to come together and solidify to form a cohesive offense. But man, the potential there, he has NFL caliber talent. I really hope I wish he had come in a little bit lower expectation. To call him the best quarterback in the conference is maybe a little bit unfair to some guys that have already been in the conference and have, played games and put up significant numbers at this level. But I would have been the first one to say, if he had been ranked 3rd, 4th, whatever, that I think by end of year, he easily could be, not just number 1, but number 1 by a long margin, just because I think he's going to be put in position to succeed and to put up good numbers, something that we haven't seen since those Brandon Dowdy and Mike White days of Jeff Brom and yesteryear. So, really excited about what we're going to roll out there at quarterback.
Well, it looks like you're right. If you just take the guy and you plug him into a whole new system, expectations and, will he be able to match up at this level versus that? Well, that's a whole nother argument. But you're talking about a guy who's coming along with his offensive coordinator and 3 wide receivers, on top of the fact that the Tops went out and absolutely dominated the transfer portal at wide receiver. They lost a lot of guys. They retained some big weapons, but then they went out and got a whole lot of burners and pass catchers to help set up this offense. And I mean, they ran the air raid at Houston Baptist, where Zappa comes from, and it was vastly successful. You talked about some big games. They played a game against Texas Tech. They came in a 40-point underdog, and they ended up losing that game 35-33. So they're right there with a Big 12 team. And say what you will, that's a pretty good testament right there when you come in a 40-point underdog and lose by 2 in a game that you probably could have won. But is it fair to say at this point it looks like Western Kentucky's going to go full on air raid, or is that, kind of like, well, we'll see. It'll probably be a little bit more pass heavy, but you're not ready to call it full on air raid yet. What do you think? Is it just a little bit more pass heavy right now?
I think they're really going to play into, how the offense is clicking. I mean, there's still a lot of unknowns at the offensive line that we'll discuss at that position group. But, how fast does that group gel? And, pass protection, opening up run lane, it's going to be very into what they can do. And I have no doubt that, those linemen are working together, putting in reps, figuring out what's the best combination. And I have zero doubt that Zappa and all those wide receivers are just putting in work to get comfortable with one another. I just think they're going to do whatever works. I think they're going to keep it simple to start the year. Trick plays here and there. Helton has always been a fan of throwing in some trick plays here and there. Hopefully Kitley will bring some new tricks to that bag. But I think we're just going to see, whatever's working and just putting the players that we have. There's a lot of pieces that can be successful. I mean, you can go up and down this offensive roster. I mean, a lot of new names, a lot of returning names, but there's so many weapons, so many options to spread that ball around. But it all has to start with the offensive line holding protection or opening up lanes to run, and then the quarterback getting the ball out. So, I think it's going to be a simple game plan in the beginning. And as that familiarity grows, then I think we'll start to see, additional areas of the offense start to be peeled back and exposed, especially during that non-con getting into conference kind of mode. I don't think they're going to show all the tricks and everything they're trying to do during the non-conference part of the season. So, I think we're going to keep it simple to put some points up and win some games.
Yeah, I'm glancing at the schedule right now, and I'm wondering if we'll actually see what Western wants to do as a true offense, or if they'll even be tested really to have to be forced into a pass or have to be forced into a run game for a number of games. I mean, you talk about week 1, it's UT Martin. I don't know how much of a threat that's going to pose. They may be able to pass up and down the field at will. They may be able to run up and down the field at will. Who really knows there? Then you talk about going to Army, and Army is generally its own beast in and of itself. There have been some competitive games with Western Kentucky in recent years, but who knows what you're going to get with Army? I mean, historically, they're, like I said, their own animal. The service academies are generally their own animal, so hard to get use them as a measuring stick for where you are, and then you go right into a bye week. So your first real test as an offense and as a team really may come September 25th against Indiana. So you may be a month into the season, which is a good thing. Maybe you have some time to work out some kinks, work on some things, ease into the playbook if you need to. I don't really think that'll be a huge problem, at least as far as the offensive pass game goes. Seems to be a lot of familiarity there with the coaches and several players, but it's just something to keep an eye on. And then, you get to take a crack at Michigan State, and then you come back and start opening conference play with UTSA, who should be really tough this year, sporting one of the better backs in the conference, but that, that's a defensive side of the ball kind of question. But look, let's talk about these guys that are on the roster. We've talked about Bailey Zappi. He's a grad transfer from Houston Baptist, 6'1", 220-pound senior, grad transfer, senior, whatever you want to call it. Listed as Phil Steele's number overall draft eligible quarterback. Don't know how you're going to sneak up on people when you're landing that high up on lists like that. All he did at Houston Baptist was pass for over 10,000 yards. And that still is a relevant number in today's college football landscape. Anytime you can get to 10,000 yards, it's a big freaking deal. Very efficient passer, 900 out of 1477 for the career. Like I said, over 10,004 yards at Houston Baptist, 78 touchdowns to 39 interceptions. That is a little bit, I don't know that you can rely on that stat too much, because last season alone in their limited season, he had a 15-1 touchdown to interception ratio. So, 78 to 39 touchdown interception ratio, a little bit misleading. And Phil still calls him the first team all conference quarterback, at least as far as Phil is concerned, preseason. That is also on the roster. Another transfer quarterback, redshirt sophomore Carson Baker, the 6'3", 210-pounder, coming from San Diego State, where he saw 5 starts in 8 career games over the course of 2 seasons for the Aztecs. 78 out of 128, 789 yards, 4 career touchdowns, 3 career interceptions. Right off the bat, Steve, let's just talk about these 2 guys before we venture further down the roster. We're going to talk about all 6 guys, or at least mention all 6 guys. It's hard to get a nail on these incoming freshmen, but they're on the roster. We're going to mention them. These 2 guys here, you got to think they're QB1 and QB2. I don't care what any coach says. They're going to tell you it's an open competition unless somebody comes up super injured. Bailey Zappi was brought in to throw the freaking football. He's got to be QB1 for week 1. And Baker is the next one that's got the most experience, at least from the FBS level. So you got to think he's QB2. So what about these 2 guys? We've talked quite a bit about Zappi so far. In your mind, despite what you may hear in the media, despite what you hear everywhere else, is he quarterback 1 for you?
Oh yeah, he's quarterback 1. If he breaks his left foot, he'll probably still be quarterback 1. No. I think he just has a lot more familiarity with the offense at this point, with the coordinator and several receivers. He's been in Bowling Green for a while now. Carson Baker was kind of a head scratcher. When you get a kid that's from San Diego, played at San Diego State, I don't know what the connection was, how we lured him into Bowling Green. But it's always nice to pick up a guy that has experience. Good build on him, 6'3", 210, and hopefully can play and throw the ball if we need to get down the depth chart. I just don't know what to expect from him, and I hope, obviously, injury-wise, I hope we don't have to go there. But, someone that brings some experience at that level doesn't hurt to have him on your roster. So, welcome addition. Just hope he doesn't have to be utilized very often this coming season.
Well, San Diego State's been a pretty successful program in recent history. Last year, kind of a 500 year, but, you can kind of throw a lot of stuff out the window when you're talking about last season. It was just play who you can, when you can, and if you can string 2 games together, then, good on you. But at least he's probably getting some quality coaching, playing against quality opponents, teams like Boise State and other Mountain West teams. In Nevada and Utah State, stuff like that. So it's not like you're just coming from a nowhere school playing other nowhere schools and you got a little bit of game. So I think it makes for a quality QB2 if that's the route that they go. He's played in some big time ball games and probably made some pretty good big time throws. So he's been at game speed at this level. I have no idea how Western Kentucky of all schools is recruiting quarterbacks in the the Pacific Coast, not just out west, but the Pacific Coast. You've got now 3 quarterbacks on the roster from the Pacific Coast. Okay. And it doesn't get much farther than Bowling Green, Kentucky, than the state of Washington. And there are 2 quarterbacks from the state of Washington. So let's talk about the other 4 guys that are on the roster. Redshirt sophomore. Man, I'm going to butcher this name, but I'm going to try it. It's Drew Zaubi, Zaubi. I'm sorry if that's way wrong, but hey, it is what it is. 6'4", 225-pounder. According to his WKU Sports bio, comes from Reedley College. I'm assuming that's a JUCO. Never heard of Reedley College before, but I did learn that in 2018 he was actually on the roster of the Louisville Cardinals. Just did not see any game action. So he's a Kentucky kid. 6'4", 225-pounder. Got to love the build. Got to love the height. So he's obviously was a successful high school quarterback. You don't land at Louisville if you're just so, I wouldn't imagine. But, another local-ish kid, in-state kid that you got to like having to the roster. And we're going to talk about a trio of freshmen. Darius Ocean on the roster last year, like the only dude left that was on the roster last year. 6 foot, 190-pounder out of Raleigh, North Carolina. And then, of course, the two brand new newcomers that were in high school. Chance McDonald, 6'1", 210-pounder from all the way at Steilacoom, Washington. And Grady Robeson, 6'1", 195-pounder from Sammamish, Washington. I looked at that like 4 times thinking it said Sandwich. I was like, what a wild name, man. But it's Sammamish, Washington. So how in the heck do the Toppers recruit 2 dudes out of the state of Washington, a transfer quarterback from the portal from San Diego, and then you get a kid from Texas, and then and an in-state dude and a dude from North Carolina? How in the hell are you recruiting way out west? The draw on the hill must be strong for quarterbacks, man. That's all I got to say. So of these guys, I know you keep track on recruiting. You love to know who's made the commitment. Of these younger guys, or the latter 4, really. It doesn't just have to be these freshmen. Who intrigues you the most? Who do you think potentially could see some game this year if there's some blowouts or maybe some injuries or whatever the situation calls for? Who's that young guy that might be the first one off the bench to see some game time?
Well, of those 4 that we just mentioned, Robeson, Ocean, McDonald, and I'm going to call him Drew Zaubi, there, the Louisville kid. We saw 2 of those, 3 of those at the spring game. So if you kept up with my spring game video thread, you saw video from 3 of those, all of them except the Washington kid, McDonald, because they were played a spring semester of football instead of a fall season. So he did not get on campus till after he graduated. And Zaubi, we saw some live footage, I guess you could say. Drew, big kid, you could tell he has a little arm on him. Ocean and Robinson, they honestly, they remind me a little bit more of runners, guys that are going to pull the ball down and run. Almost kind of that Drew, the Eccles type role when he was a backup, and also Pigram, he had a tendency to pull the ball down and like to run. So, as a change of pace, if Zappa and Baker are going to be your more traditional pocket quarterbacks, drop back passing, trying to spread the ball around. I think if for some reason we're in a position where we need to maybe have that option to quarterback sneak, get some short yardage, maybe even near the goal line, trick play, not handing out to a running back. I think that's when we might see Ocean or Robeson, as we did see those guys in the spring game. And you could just tell they had a little bit more mobility about them, a little bit more tendency to tuck the ball and run. Not saying they can't throw the ball, but they just seem more adept at running the ball. So I think if we're going to see them, I think it'll be kind of just improvised plays drawn up for, hey, this is going to be a design quarterback keeper, hike the ball, they're going to go for that short yardage. So I think, if we have to get away from the pocket quarterback situation, I think we'll lean on those guys, and hopefully McDonald could be, truly redshirted, because I think he could definitely be a guy of the future, along with another quarterback commit here from locally in Bowling Green. that, down the road could be the future of our quarterback position. So hopefully, if those guys see the field, hopefully it's not, because they had to throw the ball because we have a lot of injuries. So, I think those are good running options like Piggy was in the past.
It's apparent now that we're seeing the quarterback position recruited differently than we've ever seen it. And that's because of the new rules that are in place, the transfer portal, of course, and the one-time transfer rule without having to sit out. So, the approach to where you would get a kid and, he might sit for a year and then be QB2 for a year and then maybe get 2 years to start, while ideal, might not necessarily be what the future of college football is, because it darn sure doesn't appear like what the present of college football is. There's a lot of guys that enter the portal year in and year out now, and for better or worse, there's guys out there to be had. So if you're that guy, you're the coach that wants to be aggressive and take a risk on a guy that might be a high reward dude that's played a lot of ball at another school, knowing he can come in and play for you immediately, then as a high school guy coming out, that's got to be pretty intimidating, because it's even harder now for you to get reps that you need at a young age, get that development. It's going to be hard. So when we talk about Marshall's QBs, we'll talk about the same thing of how the position is recruited. We've never seen it recruited in that fashion in Huntington, and we're seeing it in a different fashion here too. 3 guys via transfer, 3 guys via recruitment, traditional recruitment. That's a big number when 50% of your roster at quarterback is transfer. So in general, though, Steve, as the unit, what do you think we're going to see? Now, I'm not talking about, we're talking about 5,000 yards passing this year. We're talking about 50 touchdowns this year. While that would be great to see, and while it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility, it's on the highly unlikely side of possibility, but it's not an impossibility. Let's help the fans kind of put some context to this unit that we're talking about, these guys and these players that we're talking about, by assigning them to an era of quarterback play. And of course, the Brandon Doughty and Mike White era are just like, that's the rarefied air. That's the one end of the rainbow with the pot of gold at it. And then there have been some years in recent years that are kind of on the other side of the rainbow. And it's, of course, nothing against the player that was player or players that were involved in those eras. It's just the play wasn't at a high caliber as we saw in, 14, 15, 16, and 17. So where would you liken your gut reaction? Where do you think this is going to land? It's going to land closer to the pot of gold, or it's going to land closer to the other side of the rainbow when it's all said and done?
Yeah. I mean, there's too much talent on the offensive side of the ball. Even when you look at the offensive line, which is going to be heavily new. I mean, a lot of new faces are going to be on that line when we get to that position group. There's just too many offensive weapons, from wide receiver to tight end to running back, and just deep at every position. And then, having, again, the plug and play, 3 wide receivers from Houston Baptist, starting quarterback from Houston Baptist, offensive coordinator from Houston Baptist. There's a lot of familiarity there and a lot of people that are going to help train that new system in. We will be moving from, Tyson Helton and Brian Ellis offense to now Tyson and Kitley, which is going to probably open up the playbook more. Ellis had some high expectations on what he was going to bring to the field, but we didn't see a lot of offensive yards and points being produced the last couple of years. I expect that we're going to land a lot closer to the Doughty and Mike White days. 4,000 plus yards is a big goal. Talking 40 plus touchdowns is a big goal. But I really think, especially game 1, UT Martin, it really has kind of the Rice game, Mike White vibes for me when he came out through 400 yards, 5 touchdowns. You might have been there, if I'm
I
not
was
mistaken.
there, yeah. I
And
was there.
so I really think there's going to kind of be that expectation of we have a new shiny toy and we want to show it off.
Yeah.
Kind of when we're going from Dowdy to Mike White, there are a lot of people saying, it's going to drop off. You can't keep doing what you're doing with a new guy back there. And I think Brom heard that. I think he knew that. And he said, hey, I got a new shiny toy back here with a big right arm, and put up some yards and some points. And there's a lot of ego that goes into coaching. You want to be the best. And I think the criticism of the last couple of years, Helton has heard it. I think that's why there was a lot of shakeup in the coaching ranks. And, the expectation is to score points to win games, obviously. That 30-point barrier in Conference USA, you got to get there. You're not competitive. If you're scoring 19, 20 points a game, you're going to have a less than 500 record. So I think, the grass is going to be greener. I think we're going to see a lot more points, a lot more yards, a lot more excitement, a lot more fireworks and pyrotechnics in the Houch. So I'm ready for a fun year. We're, barely a month and a half now away from the opening game. So I'm excited. It's going to be a fun year.
Yeah, let's talk about that just real quick. Let's bring some context to that. Western Kentucky didn't even score an average of 20 points a game last year, just under, and still was 5-7, right? So they were just right there. And if just a field goal more average per game, a touchdown average more per game, and you're flipping that record, you're easily 7-5, maybe staring at 8-4 or a little bit better. So it was all kind of right there. And yeah, there's some big pieces that are gone at other position groups. But there's a core of guys across this roster on both sides of the ball and special teams particularly that are still on the hill. And if you're a Western Kentucky fan, you should breathe a little bit of air of optimism this year, because I think it's a little bit different than the way we would try to bring some positivity to the situation in years past. There were some all-timers on rosters from last year and the year before that were just kind of in the unfortunate situation of being the age they were. If these guys had another year, decided to come back and wanted to, not chase the NFL dream or whatever the case may be, this could be a really dangerous team. I still think they're going to be plenty tough. And, like we always say, it's FAU, Marshall, and Western Kentucky. It seems like one of those three always rises out of the East, and Western gets them in back-to-back weeks, which is unfortunate. But it's at the end of the season. So you're going to have an opportunity to potentially control your own fate with 2 wins there at the end of the year, just like FAU probably will and just like Marshall probably will. So this team, I don't think, is going to sneak up on too many people after the bye week. We'll probably have a decent indicator that they can score and how they score and how easy it is or how difficult it is. So for better or for worse, it's going to be hard to sneak up on somebody after you play those first 2 games. I'm with you. I think, Tyson Helton is probably kind of like, look, I got this dude here. I'm ready to throw a bunch of yards and a bunch of points up on the board. But at the other side of me is like, do you really want to give that away against UT Martin? Maybe not. I mean, maybe you want to save that until Indiana and really get a splash win. Because who gives a rip if you beat UT Martin by 10 or, and lose to Indiana potentially, or beat UT Martin by 40 and then go down there and get blown out at Indiana, whatever the case. I'm sure Toppers would rather beat the Hoosiers, and sneak up on them than sneak up on UT Martin. You don't have to sneak up on UT Martin. Sorry, guys. So let's talk about these 6 questions. I don't remember what it is, how many it is. So this is probably going to be the easiest segment we do of all these position groups. Who of these QBs are you most excited to see this season?
Well, there's this guy that we landed from Houston Baptist. His name is Bailey Zappa. He wears number 4, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, number 4. I hear he's pretty good. And I think he's going to fit in with our offense and the game plan that we're putting together. If he can get along with the offensive coordinator, and some of those wide receivers, I think he has a chance to be special. First team all conference is a lofty preseason goal, but I think by the end of the year, he may have earned that merit. So I'm looking forward to seeing Bailey Zappa, number 4, get out there and put some points on the board.
Yeah, I'm with you. Without a doubt, until somebody proves me wrong or dethrones that excitement, it's Bailey Zappa for me too. All the makings to be the next star quarterback at Western Kentucky. All the makings are there. I was one of those guys who sat at this microphone all those years ago and said, there's no way you're going to bring in a transfer quarterback and plug him into a system and throw for 4,000 yards and 40 touchdowns after Brandon Dowdy left. And boy, was I wrong. And you were nice enough to point out how wrong I was about that. but I owned up to it. And right, Mike White did it. That was under Tyson Helton. Here we are. Let's go back around and bring the circle around again. Tyson Helton's back in town. He's the head coach now. He brought in a passing game guru in Zach Kitley, who coached some of the biggest quarterback names in the world and some of the most prolific in college football as well. I mean, whenever you say the name Patrick Mahomes, people perk up when you talk about quarterback. He's just like the most popular quarterback in the NFL right now. And when he was hired at Western Kentucky, well, Patrick Mahomes was tweeting about it. Congratulatory messages because, he was under Kitley's tutelage a little bit there at Texas Tech. So the pedigree is there. The production on the field is there. We just need to see if it'll all come together for Western Kentucky to make a run at a Conference USA title. Who is the hardest to replace, Steve, from last year's quarterbacks that have departed?
Well, I mean, Piggy T started the most games, and put us in position to win some ball games. Then also you had Kavaris Thomas that left, who, may have had more upside in the long run, but just never really had a full chance to kind of take the reins of the offense. And when he did, he just didn't, kind of exceed expectations. So I'd have to go with Piggy T. Kind of a guy that had a lot of experience coming from Maryland, and had an opportunity to play here. Good guy. I wish him the best. If he had decided to come back, I would have been okay with him being on the roster. I just don't think he would be the guy that take us to the next level, and getting back to winning seasons and competing for conference championships potentially. That's kind of the goal, the expectation of every team, but especially Western, after 14, 15, 16, just being a very, very good offensive team and just underperforming last year. So it's Piggy T, but it's okay because I think we're going to be all right.
Yeah, I disagreed for whatever reason. I did say Kavaris Thomas, and I thought he would be the hardest to replace because he had the potential to play other positions. I just thought maybe they would try him at, a tight end spot or something because he just had such a big body and such an athlete. And I know the guy wanted to play quarterback. It's what he came out of Lakeland, Florida, just up the road from me, Western Kentucky's first ever 4-star recruit. I mean, highly touted. Lots of people were excited, and it just didn't work out for whatever reason. It happens. We see it all the time across college sports. I mean, he did come in the Moonshine Throwdown last year and gave Western Kentucky an absolute spark. Led them right down the field, scored a touchdown, and threw a dart to basically end the game to who, I don't remember if that was to Tinsley or to
Dalvin Smith.
I couldn't remember if it was one of the two of them, but still 2 touchdowns in the game after a completely abysmal effort through 3 and something quarters. It was ugly offensively for the Tops in that game. So he gave the fans a little bit of hope, gave us a ray of hope that we thought, wow, this is the guy, this is the answer. And then, for whatever reasons, he had to come out and play against UAB, and it just couldn't put it together. And, now they're both, Piggy T and Kavaris are both in the portal. And I was just looking at the portal for the Tops, and I don't see Piggy T having a landing spot right now, and I couldn't find Kavaris at all. So I don't know where he is, but who's your breakout player for the Tops in the quarterback unit this year, Steve?
We might have us a clean sweep here. It's going to be Bailey Zappa. Lord and health willing, the guy's going to put up some big numbers. I think we're going to do everything we can to put him in position to succeed. And, Lord willing, he's going to lead us to a lot of victories. So I think it's going to be Bailey Zappa. I hope it's going to be Bailey Zappa. So it's hopefully Mr. Zappa.
Yes, rinse and repeat for me. It's going to be Bailey Zappa, going to be the breakout player. Hopefully, 10,000 yards speaks for itself. This is a, pretty pass happy league at times, and that offense should fit right in with who the toppers have to stack up against, at least in Conference USA play. Middle Tennessee's not really that stingy through the air. Charlotte's not really super stingy through the air. FIU could field a decent secondary. Marshall's going to have they're going to have a good secondary, and whatever. We'll see how it goes. But this is a pretty good pass happy league at times. There's plenty of room for yards and points. MVP for the group, Steve.
It better be Bailey Zappa at this point. There's a lot riding on his right arm to get us back to the promised land of the Dowdy Mike White yesteryear. So, Bailey Zappa, please, thank you. Final answer.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of expectation there, but still no pressure, which is a nice kind of thing. I don't feel like I'm not getting the feeling that it's Conference USA title or bust, or even Conference USA championship game appearance or bust. I do feel like there needs to be a substantial shakeup in the points per game category, but I don't feel like we got to win a title or else. But I do feel like if they do, it'll be like, wow, that was a nice welcome change. But yeah, for me, it's MVP's got to be Bailey Zappa too. I feel like he could end up being Conference USA Newcomer of the Year at the end of the year, could be MVP at the end of the year, or Offensive Player of the Year. It just depends. There's a lot of good offensive players for a lot of teams in this league, but he's a guy that could be right there with him and surpass the remaining quarterbacks in the league by the time it's all said and done. All right, it's hot take time for the quarterbacks. Steve, what have you been working with as far as this unit goes for a hot take?
Well, I'm gonna kind of go 3-prong on my hot take.
Okay.
So you kind of just spoiled one, talking about being newcomer and or offensive MVP for the season. I think he's going to be one of those. Conference USA seems to split those up and not have somebody win both of them.
Yeah.
So I think he's going to be one of those big award winners. As far as the newcomer or the total season offensive MVP. And I also think he may challenge the Dowdy single season passing records for touchdowns and yards. I think the necessity may be there that he has to throw the ball a lot and put up a lot of yards and points. So I don't think he's going to break any records, but I think 40 plus touchdowns and potentially 4,000 plus yards, which we alluded to earlier, are both in play and could very well happen just looking at his pedigree and what he can do. So some hot takes, maybe some offensive records getting broken that are pretty lofty.
Or at least challenged, right? At least challenged. Of course, we have to say this with the expectation that a full slate of games will be played. We don't know that will happen. There's still going to be coronavirus or COVID protocols in place, and I've heard things about like if they will institute forfeitures this year potentially if you can't get it under control to play the game. I don't know how true that will be, but we saw just game cancellations last year. And teams being able to opt out of playing last year, but last year was a different animal. This year, we kind of know what we're dealing with. We know how to better counteract the measures to get games in. So that's something to keep an eye on. If you get into forfeitures, that'll greatly impact a lot of stuff. My hot take is not nearly as lofty as yours. I was just going in more generalities, because I really don't know how everything's going to translate out, how the offense is going to look and all that kind of stuff. I just think that Bailey Zappi, if he is the QB1 for the entire season or the majority of the season, I'm just going to say he's going to have a 3-to-1, at least a 3-to-1 quarterback to interception ratio. The 15-to-1 last year was pretty amazing to me, especially when you mentioned that he played 2 Conference USA schools and 1 Big 12 school. So, it's not like they were playing some scrub after scrub week in and week out. He played some legitimate competition and some competition that he could play again this year. So give me a 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. I think at the end of the year, if you come up and take a breath of fresh air and you look at the stats and you're like, wow, 36-12, that's pretty amazing, then, and that's right in line with where you're at. So not too bad. So hang with us. On the other side of this break, we're going to break down Western Kentucky's coaching staff. We're just going to talk about who's who and who's doing what. And Steve's going to probably give a little insight of who departed from previous positions. I'm not that adept at knowing all that good stuff, but he probably is. So hang with us. It's Moonshine Throwdown Podcast.
And Tinsley in motion. Bingham will roll out. There's Tinsley open. Touchdown. Hilltoppers. A 3-yard touchdown pass, and it's 26-7 Western Kentucky.
Okay, we are back. Let's round out this episode, the first in our series of position group breakdowns. We're going to talk about the coaching staff, Steve, and we'll just run down everybody. We'll talk about them for a couple of seconds, and then just get everybody up to speed with who is coaching what and what things might have changed from last year. Of course, nothing has changed at head coach. Tyson Helton entering his 3rd season as Hilltoppers head coach. Again, I pulled all of this info off of WKU Sports. So if it's inaccurate, just blame those folks because that's where I pulled it from. New offensive coordinator in town. We've talked about it a number of times. Zach Kitley also doing double duty as the quarterback's coach, which makes complete sense. This will be his first season heading over from Houston Baptist, where he was the OC there as well. Zach Kitley, I didn't know much about the guy until, you start deep diving in, because it's not a name that I'd heard before. And generally when you pull somebody out of the FCS ranks, I just don't keep tabs that close on FCS football. But they put up hell a lot of numbers, a hell a lot of yards at Houston Baptist over the past couple of seasons with him there. And we talked about his pedigree at Texas Tech, working with guys like Kingsbury and Patrick Mahomes. So the resume speaks for itself. There's a lot of excitement. Of all the coaches that we're going to talk about, I've got to think this is your number one best hire type thing, because this is what could get butts in seats from one week to the next. Moving down to the coordinator spot, defensive coordinator Mo Crum steps up from co-DC linebackers coach, I think last year at Western Kentucky, to the full-on defensive coordinator position. Of course, this is his first season in that role, but definitely not his first season on the Hill. Takes over for Clayton White, who moved onward to South Carolina, which is a team that really put together themselves a Moonshine Throwdown coaching staff. They took a number of coaches from Marshall and Western, and we'll see how they do down in Columbia. Co-offensive coordinator and now inside wide receivers coach, moving over from quarterbacks last year, is the aforementioned Brian Ellis. First season in that role with inside wide receivers, 3rd season overall, been with Helton since the beginning of his tenure at Western Kentucky. And really before that, he was on staff way back when Tyson was OC at Western under Brom. Defensive line, Kenny Baker, 2nd season with the Tops, came over from UT Chattanooga, where he coached defensive line for another 4 years previous. Linebacker here. Linebacker. Here's a good one, Steve. Pat Bastian, first season in BGKY. Where'd he come from? Oh, he coached corners at Marshall last year. Yes, got to have some familiarity with the rival. And yet another coach flipping from the herd to the Toppers. Outside wide receivers coach Josh Crawford, first season with the Tops. He was a co-OC and assistant head coach at Colquitt County High School in Georgia last year. They're a 7A. Man, I can't. Do y'all have 7A in Bowling Green? What's the biggest y'all got? 5A? Man, but they even got 5A in West Virginia. AAA is as big as it gets there. So 7A, I can't even imagine. Honestly, I don't even know how big it gets here where I'm at in Florida. I'm sure it's pretty big. 7A is probably about the same thing. I don't know. Offensive line coach Stephen Hamby, first year at this role. Second year, I think, with the Tops was Western Kentucky offensive line quality control last year. Moves into the role full-time this year. Cornerbacks coach Kenoto Hudson, first season with the Toppers. Spent the last couple of seasons as cornerbacks coach at Illinois under Lovie Smith. And who was it that left the top staff and went to Illinois? I cannot think of his name right off the top of my head. But he coached like defensive line, was recruiting coordinator or something like that. Do you remember?
Yeah, I just went blank on him. And I was thinking about him earlier, too. The Georgia Pipeline. He was the Georgia Pipeline. Yeah. Man, it'll hit me here in a minute.
Okay, it'll hit him. Special teams coach and safeties, Andy LaRussa. Kind of a weird combo. Usually your special teams coach doesn't double dip, but safeties and special teams, Andy LaRussa, third season with the Tops there. Guess been here with Tyson Helton from the get-go. Been doing a pretty good stellar job there with the special teams, boasting one of the best punters in the conference and the country, and one of the top kickers in the conference and the country. Running backs coach, first year to the Tops, Carlos Lachlan. He was high school relations at Florida State last year for a couple, 2-3 years maybe. And then strength and conditioning coach, Jason Veldkamp, third season with the Toppers as director of strength and conditioning. And somebody that Stephen alluded to earlier as a recent quarterback commit is the son of Jason Veldkamp. So he could be the quarterback of the future if that sticks true and he remains with the Tops. Steve, a lot of first-year guys on this Topper coaching staff. Some veteran coaches in the college ranks, some first-time coaches in the college ranks. Some guys moved up from grad transfer or not transfer, grad assistant or quality control or what have you in a first-time assistant coach role. So I think the Toppers needed to make some changes. Tyson Helton has never been shy about making those changes. We've talked about that before as a difference between he and Doc Holliday is where Doc would just kind of hang on for an extra year before making a move. Tyson never did that. If he identified a problem, he changed it for the next season and tried to make it better. So let's talk to me about this coaching staff. What do you like? What do you not like? And some of your favorite moves?
Well, I mean, we've been talking for years about, our ability to hold on to Clayton White and just being amazed that he stayed around for a couple extra years when he definitely had offers and the ability to go somewhere else. Finally, he got that call. He decided to go somewhere. But when you have the ability to keep the continuity, that Mo Crum with the experience with the staff, with the players, with the school, with Helton and expectations, when you kind of hand a baton off like that and not bring somebody in that's going to shake up the whole system, somebody the players already know, familiar with, respect, I mean, that's such a huge, huge, huge thing and an advantage anytime you can have continuity. And then, the other coordinator, bringing in somebody, Kitley, who's going to be expected to be a guru, put up a lot of points. Ellis still with familiarity to the offense, sliding to those inside receivers. And then from there, when you start plugging in all those kind of position-specific assistants, really it starts breaking down into those connections that some of those guys have. The coaching trees and those connections, go from coast to coast. The one that I'm most excited about is the running back coach, Lachlan. I mean, if you see him, he looks like he could suit up, play running back right now because he's huge. But he's done a lot of high school recruitment and development in Memphis and in Florida. So there's a lot of recruiting ties there that he will bring to the Hill. So you have to be excited when you open up two big pipelines like that, or keep them open, and somebody that has relationships already developed there. And then all the other guys, they're coming, they're new onto the staff, but they have relationships within our staff previously, or they would have been hired. But they'll get a chance to come on, be on staff, learn the system, the culture, the players. And eventually down the line, they're going to grow. And some of those guys are going to get shots to move up to offensive or defensive coordinator or higher elevated position coaches. We all have to start somewhere. And I think bringing in young guys that are excited and new to a system isn't always a bad thing, especially when you're top of the line as experience and continuity. So I'm excited. I think the coaching staff, the shakeups were needed. Some of it was people moving on. But I think overall the staff is in good position. And if you follow their social media, I mean, they are all doing a lot of team bonding with their position group. So just excited for the energy that they all bring to the Hill.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a better cohesive staff from a production standpoint, from a results standpoint. A lot of interesting hires in the way that, like, for example, Coach Lachlan, you talk about Memphis, which is an area, major recruiting hub that's fairly close to Bowling Green, something that you can hit and get a lot of players out of, and he's got experience working there. Of course, anytime you can get down into Florida, the concentration of talent is just massive. I mean, it just is. And to have a guy that was in charge of high school relations at one of Florida's top tier universities is nothing but a plus. The relationships that you build there, it's immeasurable in how important that can be, because a lot of times, kids will commit to coaches, not necessarily to the program. And even if you can get a handful of those guys over the course of a couple of years, they can be real impact players. One thing that stands out to me, though, is that there is no dedicated tight ends coach, even though Western boasts some of the finest tight ends in the country, and especially, in the conference and in the country. Of course, a position group we'll talk about when we talk about wide receivers and tight ends, but a few transfers came in. Of course, you got Joshua Simon still on the roster. So a lot of talent there, but it's just wild to me that there is no dedicated tight end coach. You have an inside wide receivers coach and an outside wide receivers coach. So they got to fill in somewhere. But other than that, I mean, this is interesting. I like some of the ties that we have here. Some guys that were elevated into positions like Mo Crum. He's paid his dues a little bit, paid to coach positions, and now he gets a shot to run the whole defense. Pat Bastian coming over from Marshall. I love that tie, of course. Anytime I can have something like that to talk about, then that's always good for me. I mean, we talk about that happening with it was the running backs coach. I can't remember his name right now, but he left Marshall and came to Western Kentucky, and then left Western Kentucky with Brahma, went to Purdue, and he's still there. And you talked about some of these graduate assistants or assistants, quality control, whatever. There's a myriad of guys that are there in various roles, but one in particular is like an all-timer that's back on the Hill in a quality control role, and that's special teams quality control coach Garrett Schwettman. I mean, he's already been a position coach, and now he's back on the Hill, bringing more knowledge to an already talented stable of kickers and punters. Anytime you can get an all-timer back, that's great. And Garrett is an all-timer. I've had the opportunity to not meet him, but I've met his dad on a number of occasions, and they absolutely love what we do. They are appreciative of the information we bring, and they're great folks. So I love that that Garrett Schwettman is back on the Hill. Steve, any final notes on the coaching staff before we close out this first episode? Any final thoughts? And then we'll wrap this one up, and we'll come back with, I don't know. It's dealer's choice on position group breakdowns, folks. I can't tell you which one it is. It's whatever Steve's in the mood to talk about. It's what we're going to talk about. I'm in a supporting role for these. It's his call. So how about some final thoughts?
I mean, overall, there's a lot of unknown, but there's a lot of excitement just across the board and expectations, especially when you have a little bit of a down year like we had last year with COVID and just kind of coming up short from the quarterback position and offensive output. There's a lot of buzz. and just a lot of high expectations. Even though we maybe picked third in the East, there's definitely the talent and the ability to win the East. And I'm not trying to just speak with red goggles and red glasses. I really think that talent and that ability is there. If it all comes together, it's a lot of pieces that have to work together and come together and work as a unit, both offense, defense, and special teams, with a lot of new faces, a lot of new coaches. But I think the talent up and down the roster is phenomenal right now, something that we haven't seen since those glory years, just especially at, the quote unquote, I know you had to hear it, skill positions.
Yeah.
There's some talented guys there. And then there's some experience in the trenches that, even though they're new faces, there's experience there that should help stabilize what we want to do. And if they know the role and do what they're supposed to do, it could be a special season in Bowling Green. Could be a special couple season. How long can we keep it together, keep it rolling, keep the band all together? So, buckle in, hold on tight. It'll be fun in Topper Land again. A lot of points, a lot of fireworks.
Yeah, it could be a whole lot of fun. And to be honest with you, I want to see that again. It feels like the league is better when Western Kentucky is better. And I don't want to say that like, the success of the league hinges on how well the Toppers do. But let's face it, the more competitive teams we have in the East, the better games we have. And it's really fun to see Western Kentucky be able to throw a wrench in the plans of teams who think they got it figured out this year. We've seen them be able to do that in years past when they weren't that good. Let's be honest. Western hasn't been too terribly great the past 3-4 years. And they've still been able to ruin the seasons for a couple of teams. They've still been able to come out of nowhere and dominate a game that we didn't think they necessarily had too great of a chance in. And now we get to talk about them in the position of teams may have to knock them out of contention. They may be primed to make a run here. And it's not just hyperbole. I like to steal Trace's word now because I enjoy that word. It's a funny sounding word, but it's getting the point across. We're not just shooting the shit here and just saying words. We really believe that this team could be special. Will it? Who knows? But I felt more positive about them this year than I have in years past. And yeah, we've got a whole brand new quarterback room, essentially, a whole lot of change across the coaching staff, a whole lot of change across the offense as a whole, but still we feel good about it. And the best part about all of it, there's no pressure to win. If it doesn't fully materialize, it won't end the world. But as long as they do better than, 6-6 or 7-5, if you get up to that 8-9 win total, this is going to be a pretty successful season when you talk about 5 wins from a year ago. So I like what Steve says, buckle in and enjoy the ride. It could be special. It could be really special. So I don't know when we'll come back. We'll try to do this again. I don't know, maybe next weekend, maybe on later this week. Most likely at the end of next weekend. We'll come back with another position group and I'll figure out what it is when we start recording. So until next week, I'll take over for Trace. Well, I guess I should say Trace and I will bring you Marshall quarterbacks and coaching staffs at some point really soon. He's just out of town this weekend and couldn't join the show. So until we can get back to you, go Herd. Steve, take us out.
Go Tops.
It's Moonshine Throwdown Podcast. Later.